Lesson 2, Defining Inclusion. Welcome to Lesson 2, Defining Inclusion. According to the Netter principles, diversity and inclusion are terms frequently used together but have different meanings. Diversity describes the spectrum of human similarities and differences. It refers to the composition of people associated with the organization. Inclusion, on the other hand, describes the way an organization configures opportunity, interaction, communication, information, and decision-making to utilize the potential of diversity. It refers to the organizational environment. Achieving inclusion means creating the structures, policies, and practices in organizational life that recognize the existence of multiple perspectives and signal the importance of learning from differences. It refers to the systemic nature of an organization. Inclusion is not limited to the way an organization deals with employees. It may refer to interactions with visitors, board members, donors, vendors, suppliers, and subcontractors as well. You can be a diverse organization without being inclusive. We saw diversity efforts with poor inclusion strategies with the left-handed organization. Think of inclusion as diversity in action. It is how diversity is utilized. Inclusion requires shaping workplace culture that ensures greater levels of engagement from everyone throughout the organization. Inclusive workplace practices have processes and policies that demonstrate that people of different diverse backgrounds have unique perspectives that should be respected to create a healthy workplace culture. But also, their perspectives can be leveraged for innovative and creative exploration in order to drive success. In Lesson 1, we learned that diversity includes people with different racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, cultural backgrounds, life experiences, point of views, beliefs, and interests. This data is often collected and quantified with no other metrics of success. To paraphrase Alvin A. Smith of A. Smith and Associates, diversity is about counting heads, but not making heads count. Diversity alone only ensures the presence of people who are seen as different, but it does not change the culture of the organization. It does not ensure productive engagement of the diverse participants, and it doesn't seek to measure long-term outcomes outside of numeric determination. Let's take a look at the differences between inclusion and fitting in. Building off the Netter principles of inclusion, here are some ways to understand how to build an organization of inclusion. Demonstrated commitment to diversity. An organization that prioritizes inclusion must also be committed to diversity. Diversity is visible and also could be invisible because all elements of diversity are not obvious. Diversity among all the dimensions are apparent at all levels of power and responsibility throughout the organization. People with an array of differences and similarities are openly welcomed, clearly valued, and have their skill set utilized in formal and informal ways throughout the organization's systems and departments. Holistic view of employees. Employees are viewed and respected as whole human beings. That includes all of their identities and all dimensions of diversity. No one is colorblind or disregards people's lived experiences. People's home life is understood to extend into the organization and therefore are considered when workplace policies, practices, and procedures are developed. Access to opportunity. An inclusive workplace creates nurturing environments where all employees have access to opportunities for professional and personal growth. This means that there are established programs and transparent communication outlets for people to be aware of these growth opportunities. accommodation of diverse physical and developmental abilities. Organizations that operationalize inclusion ensure that people with different physical and developmental disabilities are offered effective adaptations in the workplace to remove any barriers to work performance or participation. They also ensure that accessibility is demonstrated in all aspects of the organization. These areas include the products offered to employees and streamlined HR processes for employees to request accommodations. Structural shifts include training and resources that are offered on an ongoing basis, scalable pipelines to access and retain talent with physical and developmental disabilities, and providing support for external stakeholders with accessibility barriers. 360 communication and information sharing. Fostering an environment of inclusion requires clear communication of information that flows in all directions. This often requires comprehensive communication strategies that include several components. Reoccurring two-way feedback systems between supervisors and direct reports ensure that annual performance reviews are not the first or only time employees hear about their successes and challenges. It also guarantees that managers and other leaders are aware of what's happening on the ground, thus being capable to make adjustments when necessary. Having an internal communications department creates structured, cascading information that goes from the most senior level to the frontline staff with a consistent message. Everyone within the organization, regardless of their level of power, is clear about the mission, vision, and values of the organization. They clearly understand how and why steps are taken within the organization and how it directly impacts them in their position. Participatory work organization and work process. An inclusive organization recognizes that employees have traditional and non-traditional skills, educational experiences, bases of knowledge, and life experiences that can be tapped into to support the organization in meeting its goals. This can include acquired traits or experiences such as living in another country or being multilingual. According to research by Sylvia Ann Hewlett, Melinda Marshall, and Laura Sherbin, organizations with leaders who have a combination of inherent diversity and acquired diversity or external dimensions of diversity are more innovative and outperform peer organizations. By acknowledging that people's diverse identities and experiences are valuable within the organization, leaders and others see how diversity is directly included into processes of creativity, innovation, and problem solving. Hewlett and team state 6 behaviors we have found unlock innovation across the board, ensuring that everyone is heard, making it safe to propose novel ideas, giving team members decision-making authority, sharing credit for success, giving actionable feedback, and implementing feedback from the team. Leaders who give diverse voices equal airtime are nearly twice as likely as others to unleash value-driven insights, and employees in a speak-up culture are 3.5 times as likely to contribute their full innovative potential. Collaborative conflict resolution process. Organizations that prioritize inclusion recognize it is not always an easy and smooth process. There will be conflict that needs to be addressed and resolved. Inclusive organizations have a clear documented process for conflict resolution that empowers employees at all levels within the organization. It encourages departments to work collaboratively to solve problems and resolve interpersonal conflicts that can achieve agreed upon solutions. It is important that this process is supported by leadership and has mechanisms in place that do not allow for retaliation. demonstrated commitment to community relationships. Inclusive organizations recognize that it doesn't operate within a vacuum and needs to have substantive ties with external entities. Alliances with local government, schools, community-based nonprofits, and professional organizations expands its outreach to diverse communities. It widens the opportunities for inclusion of external partners and demonstrates collaboration and responsibility to those outside of the organization. Such relationships can increase access to the organization so that community members familiarize themselves with and gain a sense of belonging to the organization. Activity. This activity is structured to help you think through different types of diversity, how people can be excluded, and think through potential solutions to create more inclusion. Step 1, watch Accenture's Inclusion and the Power of Diversity video. Answer the following questions. What dimensions of diversity were highlighted in the video? What were the specific identities? Step 2, complete the following steps. Get a sheet of paper and something to write with, or create a tablet on a digital document. Create 5 columns on your sheet of paper. Label columns 2 through 4 inherent, external, type of exclusion, potential solution. Create 5 rows. Label rows 3 through 5 as person 1, person 2, and person 3. Choose 3 to 5 people from the video. For person 1, answer the following. In the inherent column, input the specific identities that were acknowledged. In the external column, input the specific identities that were acknowledged. What are the overt tactics or hidden tactics that contribute to the person's exclusion, such as policies or assumptions from coworkers? Input the answers in the type of exclusion column. Input a potential policy, practice, or procedure that could alleviate the exclusion for that person if they were in your organization. Repeat the previous steps for person 2 and 3. Pause the video, look for the table example in your workbook, complete the activity, then join us for the rest of the lesson. Inclusion versus fitting in. There is a significant difference between inclusion and fitting in. An inclusive workplace culture ensures that people are thought of, cared for, and considered with respectful, honest, and authentic interaction. Inclusion efforts are intentional actions that ensure that people get a seat at the table to help make decisions. Implying or requiring employees to fit in is not inclusion. Fitting in often requires one to sacrifice a significant part of their identity in order to be accepted by coworkers and leadership. It's workplace assimilation that requires erasure. There are several downsides to an organization focused on fitting in instead of inclusion. Fitting in can encourage groupthink. If there isn't an expectation or opportunity for employees to share opposing views or offer new ideas, then alternative perspectives go unheard and innovation can be thwarted. Such lack of innovation can compromise the growth of the organization. To be clear, gaining necessary skill sets, learning the policies and practices of the workplace, or building rapport with colleagues are important components of being part of an organization. However, if such activities require someone to hide parts of their identity, it is important that the organization investigates the values it wants to uphold. Evaluating the organization's values in relation to expectations of employees and workplace culture allows us to interrogate some inconvenient truths. Everybody can't bring their whole self to work, some for good reason. If part of someone's identity is racist, classist, sexist, or uses religion or gender identity to justify their homophobia or exclusion of other religions, then we don't want them to bring that part of themselves to work. A culture of inclusion would minimize such engagement, or it will be clear to that person that the values of the organization does not align with theirs. Insider versus outsider. The way your organization values aligns with workplace culture should be clearly stated expectations of how people are to support and engage with each other, as well as how to hold each other accountable. One way to know if the organization has not quite reached inclusion is if there are spoken and unspoken insider and outsider groups. There are several ways insiders can be determined. Sometimes insiders know more information or know the information before most people. Oftentimes, their access to this information is not because of their role in the organization. It has more to do with who they know within the organization. They may have a strong connection or relationship with senior leaders and thus gaining greater access to them. An access not granted to other people in the same position in the power hierarchy within the organization. Those who are outsiders don't have that direct access. Because it is not a culture of full inclusion, there isn't an easy pathway to get that same access to leadership. Sometimes insider groups are grounded in performance or visibility. Insiders might be within the department that is more external facing to stakeholders, or they generate more revenue. Outsiders may have more of an internal focus and not have a direct impact to the bottom line. A workplace of inclusion does not have insider or outsider cultures. There are communication systems and practices that allow people's ideas to be heard and have the freedom to disagree without retribution. Inclusion means that everyone is an insider. It is not based on how much revenue you generate, seniority, or your tenure in the organization. Inclusion doesn't guarantee that everybody's ideas will be used or that everyone will like everyone's opinions and feedback. That's nearly impossible. However, an inclusive culture has a system where ideas and feedback are considered, and there is a clear and transparent process for how that information will be used or not. For example, it's important when people are included in brainstorming or the decision-making process that they are also included in developing the outcome or the solution. Activity. Part 1. Take a moment to reflect on feelings of exclusion. Get a piece of paper or open your electronic document. Document a time when you have felt excluded. This can be at any point in your lifetime, within your family, friend group, school, workplace, or another context. Document the circumstance that created your exclusion. Who was involved? Who was silent? What power did the people who excluded you have or didn't have? What power did you have or felt you didn't have? Document any feelings or attitudes that you connect to that time in your life when you felt excluded. Pause the video to respond to these questions. Once you're finished, restart the video. All right, think about what came up for you. Would you ever want to feel that again? Would you ever want to cause anyone to feel that way? Think about how a culture of exclusion in the workplace can foster some of those same feelings within your staff and colleagues. How would you define the workplace culture in your organization? Part 2. People don't want to be included in toxic environments. That compromises psychological safety or have barriers to development. Psychological safety means people feeling as though they are able to share their perspectives and feedback without retribution. Psychological safety can include knowing that you will not be humiliated or punished for making a mistake, asking questions, or presenting concerns. For those who create an unsafe environment, there should be an equitable process for holding them accountable. These barriers can include breaking guidelines for inclusion or having hidden rules for engaging with your coworkers in order to be a part of the insider group. Activity. Now, we will take a look at a lack of psychological safety in the workplace. and watching what someone may experience when trying to fit into a certain workplace culture. Watch Pearl from Pixar Spark Shorts and answer the following questions. How would you describe the workplace culture at Bro Capital? How did Pearl's colleagues find out she was coming to the office? How did Pearl's colleagues interact with her? How did Pearl attempt inclusion? How did she show this in her words, actions, and appearance? How did the workplace change with Lacey and the choices Pearl made with her? After you complete this activity, continue with the module. Part 3, reflect on your workplace culture. A common phrase that's used within organization is cultural fit. Usually this phrase is used to talk about someone who does not seem to align with the organization's explicit or implicit values, expectations, and social norms. When used as a justification to deny employment, promotion, or casual engagement, it implies that colleagues and leaders within the organization don't want to make additional efforts to ensure the person feels welcomed or is set up for success. It also implies that there's a lack of interest in doing a deep investigation of the current culture and if there are opportunities to be flexible and adapt to people's differences. The times when cultural fit can work is when it is aligned with specific expected behaviors, such as being a self-starter, independent worker, collaborative project leadership style, etc. Think about the language your organization uses that could promote inclusion or exclusion. Choose one or more areas to focus on: the hiring process, the promotion process, or everyday interactions with colleagues and leaders. What words or phrases are commonly used to describe someone who fits in your organization? What words are used to describe someone who does not? Pause the video to respond to these questions. Once you're finished, restart the video. Diversity and inclusion expert Verna Myers describes the difference between diversity and inclusion using the metaphor of a party. She says, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. In this way, diversity is grounded in the different types of people present at the party. But I encourage you to extend that metaphor even more to better investigate how power is working. Imagine you are invited to the party and you are asked to dance, but it's to music you never heard of, so you're unsure how to dance to it, even though there are plenty of people doing it around you. You feel out of place, or it's music that you don't like and therefore minimizes your ability to have a good time. What if instead you are invited to the table to plan the party? You have a say in the decorations, food, and music. You may not get everything that's exactly how you like it because compromise is involved when multiple people are planning. However, there is a greater chance that you'd be invested in the event because your ideas were acknowledged and taken into account. I also want to extend this metaphor even further. You still had to be invited to the table. That means you are a visitor. Someone else owns the table and thus had the ability to extend the invitation to you in the first place. This isn't your table. As we are thinking about diversity and inclusion, it's important to understand who has decision-making power, what they're doing with it, and who it impacts. This brings us to equity. We will talk about this in the next lesson.